Hello everyone and welcome. It is finally happening. We are driving the brand new Toyota Supra. So I actually just got off the track and my initial impression from driving it on the track is that the performance for the money is 100% there. And that's what I'm actually really excited about because I'm wondering, it is an expensive car, $50,000. It's got a 3-liter turbocharged engine, 335 horsepower. Is it going to be able to perform at a $50,000 level? And it definitely does. And it has quite a bit of torque and it feels really good. So I'm excited about this thing, and we're going to get into, some of the more details about how the car works, that kind of thing, details about, the partnership with BMW, and the things that I don't like about it. But overall, just initial impressions after coming right off of the track is that I'm impressed with it. So let's start up front, work our way through the different systems. The engine, this is a B58 inline 6-cylinder, 3-liter twin-scroll turbocharged inline 6-cylinder engine in which they partnered with BMW on. So it is a BMW platform underneath all of this. So it looks like a Supra on the outside, very similar to a BMW Z4 hardware-wise on the inside. And so looking at that engine, very good engine, 3-liter, 335 horsepower at 5,000 to 6,500 RPM, and peak torque, 365 pound-feet, coming on at just 1,600 RPM. So very early with that twin-scroll turbocharger, 1,600 RPM all the way to 4,500 RPM, you've got that flat peak 365 torque curve. So as a result, you shift down into a lower gear, put your foot down. Yeah, the power is there. Now, I asked Toyota about this engine, why did you choose the B58? Why did you partner with BMW? And they said, well, we don't make any inline 6-cylinders. We want it to be an inline 6-cylinder to, keep the heritage of the Supra alive, to maintain that inline 6 philosophy. And who makes the best inline 6-cylinder out there? And they say BMW. And I wouldn't disagree with that. I think the B58 is an amazing engine and, an amazing engine for the amount that it costs. So it does seem smart. Now, I think the natural concern is, Toyota puts a lot of effort into durability and reliability. So are you going to get that same Toyota, durability and reliability that you get with their other vehicles? And they haven't done a performance vehicle quite like this in some time. So I asked the lead engineer about that, and he said, we took that engine, we took the B58, we brought it in-house, we stripped it apart, we, noted all of our concerns, we did all of our internal testing to make sure, will it pass our requirements for reliability? And they said that it did pass all of their internal requirements, and so they expect this to be a very reliable engine. And I think, another part of it is, if you look at the US market Z4, which is running basically the same engine, it's got about 50 more horsepower, perhaps a bit of why they were conservative with the overall output of this engine is to keep that reliability standard that Toyota is known for and wants to maintain. So a little interesting that, they're partnering on an engine platform with BMW, but they're saying that they can maintain their own internal standards of durability and reliability. So from the engine, we pass to the transmission, and sadly there is only one option. There is no manual option, but fortunately it is a very good automatic transmission. So it's the ZF 8-speed that I've, bragged about endlessly in any video which I've driven a car in it. I love this ZF 8-speed automatic. It's exceptional. The shift times are crazy good. The shift smoothness is there. When you're in sport mode, it actually does have a little punchiness to it, so it's not that just like effortlessly smooth transmission style, which you can feel in a lot of different vehicles that use this transmission. You don't actually feel the shift. When you put it here in sport mode, you can actually get a little bit of a jolt there, and I think that's kind of an intentional tuning thing. And then if you put it into the normal mode, this transmission, you just don't feel a thing. It is just incredibly well engineered. I love this transmission. I hate to say that it's the only option because I do wish they offered a manual, but the good news is it is a good automatic transmission that's in it. From the transmission, we are sending that power to the rear wheel. So there is an electronic limited slip differential. It can lock up that rear differential from 0 to 100%. So 0 basically being like an open differential and 100% basically being like a locked differential. And Toyota claims that they actually tune this so that throughout that turn, it's varying that pressure for what is ideal. So, when you come into the corner versus when you're halfway through it, hitting the apex, and then powering out, making sure that they have the perfect amount of pressure applied to that differential to optimize that experience going around that corner, and to be able to put the power down, not have just one tire lighting up, obviously, send the power where it needs to go and where grip is available. So from the differential, we go out to the wheels, and these are 19-inch wheels, 9 inches up front wide, 10 inches in the back, really wide tires on this Michelin Pilot Sport tires, Super Sport tires, so not the PS4S, and I've heard a couple different reasons as to why are these not the PS4S. They claimed that these are better in the dry, and they wanted really good dry grip. I've heard different from Michelin, but these are bespoke tires for this car, so it was a joint project with Toyota and BMW to develop the tire for this car with Michelin, and so it was developed specifically for this. The other thing there is that the PS4S is a very new tire, and development for this car started in 2012. So another portion of the story which I've heard is that the reason why they're using Pilot Super Sport is because the PS4S wasn't out when they were starting development for the tire for this car. That to me makes sense because why wouldn't you go with the latest and greatest? So I think part of it is just when development started, but it does have a very sticky, I was driving on the track, they are exceptionally good tires in the dry, so a very good dry tire, nothing to worry about there. The wheels are forged aluminum, and so the weight of this car is actually just under 3,400 pounds. Now that's for the base version. There's also a premium version. They haven't released a difference in weight and what those may be, so I'm assuming this 3,400 is for the base version of the car, but not a terrible curb weight considering, the torque curve on this thing is really good. It does put down the power really well, and so, I don't think 3,400 pounds, heavy by, 90 standards for a sports car, I feel like, but by today's standards, everything seems to be getting a bit bloated, a bit heavier, and so it's actually not a terrible weight for the car. Up front, 13.7-inch rotors, and those are paired with 4-piston Brembo brakes. In the rear, depending on which trim you get, if you get the base version, you've got 13-inch ventilated rear brakes with single-piston calipers, and then if you go for the premium version of the car or the launch edition, then you are getting 13.6-inch. So very big brakes, and that's one of the things they're pretty proud of with this thing, is that the braking capacity is there. You can run this thing on the track all day, and in fact, that's what we're doing. We're running it, 5 hours or so. All day, this thing's going to be out on the track, taking a beating, and so these brakes are large enough for that. It's designed to have the cooling to be able to just run it all day long, and so I think that is very cool. They didn't actually have to up the brake size for the front rotors to either one you get. The one thing they said is they noticed some brake fade if you stay out there for a long time with the premium version. The non-premium version with the smaller rear brakes, they did say that they started to notice some brake fade on the rears only, and so as a result, if you do opt for the premium package, that's why they give you those slightly larger brakes in the rear to make sure it can just stay out there all day and you don't have to worry about braking. So as far as the suspension, it does have adaptive dampers, so you can be in comfort, sport mode, different modes there as far as your ride comfort and the quality, how much body roll you're going to get. When I first went out onto the track, my first thought was, this car feels a little high, and that's weird to me. Like, this actually has a lower center of gravity than the Toyota 86, so even though that has that flat boxer engine, and this has the taller inline engine, it does have a lower center of gravity than the 86. Now, it's also ground clearance wise about half an inch lower, so this has 4.5 inches of ground clearance versus 4.9 in the 86. So part of it is that they've lowered the car itself, but it does have a very low center of gravity, and my thought about it feeling tall initially was irrational. The more I drove it out there on the track, it does feel, a very tight, well-behaved car as far as its ride height and its ride quality and its handling capability. Now, it has electronic power steering, and it has a really high ratio for the steering, 15:1. And so Toyota seemed a little curious to hear our thoughts on the steering. The first thing I thought was, what? That's crazy high. It's higher than the 86, so it's not quite as tight of a turn-in, not as immediate of a turn-in like the 86. And honestly, the steering effort is extremely light. It doesn't require much. Now, once you get out on the track, it increases a bit. So it increases with speed at very low speeds. It's very effortless, and there's obviously a lot of assist going in there. And then as you get to higher speeds, you start to feel it more. And of course, there's a differentiation between being in sport mode, which I am now, and comfort, regular mode. But honestly, like, no matter where it is, the effort is very low, and it doesn't turn all that much with a little bit of turning, so the steering ratio is very high. That part is a little I'm not super sold on the steering. I think once you're on the track, you're not thinking about it as much, and it actually does exactly what you want it to. I think out on the road, it feels a little light, and a little. It could be a bit more a sharper steering ratio to allow for a quicker turn in. There's a little more hesitation than you expect in turning left and right than I kind of wanted it to have. So it doesn't feel like the 86 in that sense, where it's that very darty steering feel. It's a bit more GT, a bit more tour feeling to the steering. So I recently drove the BMW M3, and it has, I believe, the S58, so a twin turbocharged version of the engine in this vehicle, and honestly I feel like the turbo lag is less noticeable in this car, and perhaps that's the fact that it's paired with an automatic transmission, but I do not really notice the lag of the engine. It actually feels really good when you put your foot down. You get that power, you wait for that shift, but it doesn't feel like you're waiting for a turbocharger to spool up. So I like that about it. It seems to be a fairly small turbo that's very quick to react, and you get that peak torque really quickly. So performance-wise, the engine actually feels wonderful. From a visibility standpoint, there is a very narrow window up front. I don't think it's necessarily a problem, but it's a car that's taking style over visibility. And so looking out the front, it's fine. You can see where you're going. You can adjust as needed. These side windows are plenty large, gives you plenty of space to look out, check your blind spot, look back, that kind of thing. I don't think the visibility is necessarily bad, but it is kind of limited as far as its vertical height. So overall, before I get into my three major complaints with this thing, is that I am impressed. I think from a performance standpoint, 50 grand, this thing makes total sense. It is a great package for the money. You can get the premium package for 4 grand more, and I think that's well spent upgrade. You get better audio quality, better rear brakes, improvements in the interior as far as the seats, that kind of thing. So there's quite a bit of changes for the premium that I do believe make it worth it. Also, I don't know if you've heard, but the exhaust is just constantly crackling. Constantly. Anytime you let off. And that's fun. That's super fun. They're just dumping fuel and retarding the timing and just forcing it to do it. It's an inefficient thing, and it's for silly children like myself that enjoy it, but I love it. I think that's awesome. So let's get into the complaints, and I have 3 of them, and the internet has voiced all 3 of these, and I actually am in agreement with the internet for a lot of it. So the first one, of course, being the partnership with BMW. The fact that, the hardware in this car, if you look underneath the hood, if you look at the drivetrain, the platform of this vehicle, it's a BMW Z4, and it was developed with BMW, but BMW really did, the legwork as far as the development of the engine, the powertrain, that kind of thing. And I think that's disappointing from the perspective of if you are a huge Supra enthusiast and you want to be driving the Supra and you're passionate about it, you're passionate about something that wasn't fully Toyota. It wasn't only Toyota doing it, and I think that's kind of sad. Like with the new NSX, you have a developed in-house, it is a Honda car. Like Honda developed that vehicle, and it's truly an NSX. Whether or not you like it, and it's crazy expensive. Both of those, I think the NSX is amazing, but the price is insane. So one of the reasons Toyota is able to do this and make a car that they don't need to make, they do not need to make this vehicle. They're not doing this for the profit of it solely. Like they have the RAV4 for that. It's a car they wanted to make, and as a result, I get their side where the Supra needs to be cool, and it needs to be, it has to make sense from a marketing standpoint. And if it's not both of those things, it doesn't happen. And so that's where the partnership with BMW makes sense, because they can severely reduce the development costs in order to make it. They don't have an inline 6. So what are they going to do? Make an inline 6, and then perhaps they could use it in the Lexus lineup. I think that'd be cool. I think an in-house developed inline 6 would have been awesome. I understand financially why they did what they did. So I think there's a little bit there of just like, you're super passionate about it, you love it, you think the Supra's great, Cool, but throw a little credit at BMW because they did a lot of the legwork in developing this car. Now that said, all the suspension tuning, the engine tuning itself for this vehicle, the transmission tuning, that is all Toyota specific. They did that in-house. So they did take, they took the hardware package and said, we want to make this our own. They weren't developed side by side for suspension, engine tuning, that kind of thing. So there is their own in-house Toyota feel to it. And I haven't driven the Z4, but I have heard they are actually quite different to drive. And, they've put their own touch on this. They have certainly put their own time into development, making sure the reliability is there, making sure it feels and handles like they wanted the Supra too. So I think that aspect of it is cool. A little unfortunate, I think, that they didn't do an in-house engine. The second thing, there is no manual transmission. I think that's a real shame. I think they need to bring it. I think if enough customers tell them, Toyota, we need this, we want this, we're not buying it unless we get six-speed transmission and 3 pedals or whatever it may be, perhaps more than 6. But either way, I think they need to offer a manual transmission. I would truly consider buying this car if there were a manual transmission. And I don't think as is I want it. I really love manual transmissions. I love this ZF 8-speed, but I really wish I had a 3rd pedal. I think it would add a little bit to the joy, the playfulness that this car provides. This thing really has some fun performance. On back roads, you can actually kind of ring it out, have some good fun with it, and I think that'd be more enjoyable with a 6-speed, manual shifter rather than the ZF8. And it's not to knock on the ZF8. It's incredible as an automatic for what it is. I just think it's the Supra. Give it the inline 6, give it the manual transmission. That's what the people want. So there's my second complaint. And my third complaint has to do with form over function, and that's with the aerodynamics. So if you looked at the FT1, has really cool, awesome ducts and inlets and, holes all over the place for different various purposes. And it takes a lot of those styling cues here on the Supra, and it's like, cool, they brought all that over. But the reality is they're all plastic vents that are completely sealed. They are not actual vents. And so this is a case of, they're doing it for the aesthetics, and it is not there for function. And there's been those claims about, it's done for, if you want to race it, you can pop these things out. And it's like, give me a break. This is a road car. This is a road car sold on the street. If you want it to have functional vents, put functional vents on it. If you don't put any vents on it. That's my opinion. I think, in the early 2000s, we had to live with so many fake hood scoops and scoops all over the place, and it seemed like we were finally going away from all of the fake just scoops and air intakes and ducts, and this thing's just covered in it, and I think that's disappointing. I really wish everything looking at it was aesthetically not only pleasing, and I think it does actually look really good. Driving it around the track, I thought it looked awesome seeing a line of these things. But it's just really unfortunate to me that those aesthetic touches are not functional. It takes away from them. It's like, that looks really cool. Why did they do that? They did it purely for style, the end. And that, to me, is a bit of a disappointment. So those are my 3 complaints. But truthfully, I think this thing is awesome. I think it is worth the money, and I think the performance is there. It is a joy to drive. The steering's a little meh, and I wish there was a manual, but engine is phenomenal. The rear, the tires are great. Putting down the power is great. The ride quality is there. I like that. I think it's a really, really strong package. So I'm very impressed by it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, of course, feel free to leave those below.